Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You're tuning into an episode of the Redefining Society podcast, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. Let's face it, the future is now. We live in a hybrid analog-digital society, and we must stop ignoring it or pretending that technology is not affecting us. The line between the physical and virtual worlds has become a figment of our imagination. On it, we are continually performing a dangerous balancing act, juggling convenience, privacy, freedom, security, technology, society, culture, and even the future of humanity. There is no better place than here, and no better time than now to muse on our relationship with technology and how to redefine what society means in this new age.
Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io. BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com. Devo unlocks the full value of machine data for the world's most instrumented enterprises. The Devo Data Analytics Platform addresses the explosion in volume of machine data and the crushing demands of algorithms and automation. Learn more at devo.com.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Redefining Society on ITSP Magazine. My name is Marco Ciappelli. You should know that by now. And on Redefining Society, we talk about technology and society, society and technology, and how one affect the other. Either we do it intentionally or not. And I'm quite excited about this conversation that we're about to have today with Daniel Castro, which I will give the word in a few seconds here, because I read an article that he wrote, and it's about I read you the title. Maybe everything isn't tech's fault. And I fully agree on that. So I invited him to come on the show and have an open conversation about this and to see where he comes from with this opinion and why he decided to write an article on the ITIF, which is the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, where Daniel is vice president and director for the Center for Data Innovation. So enough about me. If you're watching the video, you can see Daniel is here. And for you listening, the audio, I guarantee he's here and this is his voice. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks, Marco. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I don't know. I just get excited for weird things. But, that's why I talk about technology and society, because it's fascinating and sometimes, make you think. And I think this is exactly that the moment where you have to think and maybe look back and say, is this perception about technology the right one? Or is there a right one anyway? So a little bit about yourself, and let's dive into this article, why you wrote it and what really inspired you to do that.
Sure. So I'm Daniel Castro. As you said, I am the vice president of a think tank called the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. I've been working on tech policy for the last 15 years or so. And it's been fascinating to see these debates that go on both in Washington, but also just more generally, the kind of debates we have at our dinner tables over how technology is changing, how it's changing society, what it means for our children, our work lives, our everything. And one thing that I've noticed is that the tone and the conversation around tech has become increasingly negative, right? It used to be that not everyone loves tech. I'm definitely a tech enthusiast. I'm a nerd. I love to kind of geek out on computers and gadgets and all of that. And I've always done that. But not everyone liked it, and that was fine. But there wasn't necessarily a hostility towards technology that I think is just an undercurrent of so many of the conversations around tech right now. And this recent article I wrote, I was kind of spurred to write it after I saw, two headlines that were kind of dominating the news during a particular week. One was about somebody's family that was suing Google after a man drowned after he drove off of a bridge that had collapsed. And he was, following Google Maps. And so, the argument was that this was Google's fault. And there were a lot of headlines around that. First of all, clearly it's a tragedy. Someone died, he was part of a family. That's a tragedy. But the question of, well, who's at fault? And all these headlines were, just focused on the question about, it was Google Maps, and shouldn't Google have to pay for this? And why didn't they fix this? And I'm just, thinking, okay, maybe, but, the average driver, you are responsible for your driving. If you can't see where you're going, you shouldn't be driving. What if there was a child in front of this vehicle? What if there was a pet? What if the person can't see, if they don't know where they're going, that's their responsibility. When I took my driver's, exam, they didn't say, you need to be qualified unless you're following someone else's directions. It was, you need to be qualified yourself. You need to be aware of your surroundings. And that's the kind of thing that, I think we kind of have lost some common sense here about, who's responsible in these different situations. And there's a tendency to just blame tech to begin with. And I think that's maybe not so productive.
And in the way, the game is just at the beginning, because if we have issues with that kind of technology, the map has been around for a very long time, and it's an immense help. As you say, it's a tragedy, but if I read correctly on the article, it was also a private road where this happened, which makes it even a little less responsible for whomever it's taking care of fixing that. And I'm thinking, all right, now we're going into self-driving cars. We're already having this ethical conversation about who is responsible for the decision that the algorithm makes. It save the pedestrian, save that pedestrian, save the driver, and who is responsible for that, the car, the driver, or whatever it is. But this has happened already way before this. So with AI and autonomous vehicles, it's going to get even worse. But you wrote an article, and I want to start from a little bit more in the past, in 2017, I believe, where you were noticing that this shift in the perception and in the way, well, not perception, actually the way that they portray technology in magazine and social media was already changing from the 80s. I'm a teenager of the 80s. So I remember when TV was the devil. You're watching too much TV. Then there is the video games. I don't even know about going the 60s with rock and roll is the devil. But, the radio. So there's always been some kind of, it's just getting exponentially, worse, this relationship, I guess, that we have with technology. We wanted to fix everything, maybe? I don't know.
And, you can even go back further than that. People were upset when, the printing press was created, but not only the printing press, but, when, they started creating, pulp novels, you had this pulp fiction, and people were complaining about, anyone could be an author, not anyone, but, more people could be authors instead of just the more elite among society. And that's always, been a concern. And people thought that was immoral, and were concerned about, who had access to spread ideas and knowledge. And we've certainly seen that debate play out with the internet. And you're right. The study we did back in, about, I guess now it's been probably 5 or 6 years ago, we looked at the tone of coverage around technology over a number of decades in the popular press, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, those types of publications. And we did see a remarkable shift over time where, it used to be maybe more neutral, covering advancements, space exploration, whatever was going on. There were always critical voices, but it was much more balanced. And now, you see this real shift, and it was just kind of clearly documented in a kind of sentiment analysis we did of these stories, where it was significantly more negative. And one thing that's noticeable to me is there are these new, we have a lot of new media, new publications online only that have been created, some focused exclusively on technology and innovation. And if you look at their mission statements aren't cover what's happening in the world of technology, or even maybe critically cover it. They're specifically focused on power dynamics that they see, whether or not they exist, on the exploitation of technology, manipulation of consumers. They're coming at it from a preconceived view of what is going on here. And I mean, if you think about kind of the traditional academic neutrality of academic research, or just kind of the more neutral point of view. Of course, no news is completely neutral, but at least an attempt to be somewhat unbiased in the coverage, giving a fair coverage. I think we've left that behind, and it's no longer reporting on what's happening, the different sides of it. It's really about how technology is causing various harms, because those are the headlines that get clicks, and those are the headlines that sell more subscriptions. And so it's a little bit of this unvirtuous cycle that we're trapped in, where the bad news sells, and so that's the news they're going to push.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. You can apply this to about everything, right? I mean, it's the bad news, so they sell more than good news. And when you do something bad, everybody points it out. And when you do something good, people are just like, yeah, whatever. I don't need to leave a comment for that. That's what I expect you to do. So in a way, there is the entire news cycle that it definitely went on not being objective anymore, if ever have been, but definitely not this bad. But let's focus on the technology. I mean, with AI, same thing right now. I mean, you can talk about generative AI, and there are strikes, legit reason. I'm not against that. But then the perception of all of it, it's always about how it's going to take jobs, how it's going to make changes in society, that they're all negative. But AI is making our life a lot better already. So why are we not talking about that? Is that an economic reason only, or is it fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting parts of the conversation around AI right now, is that, this is something I've, of course, been tracking very closely. And, the headlines of, if somebody, if a company were to use AI to make a hiring decision, like Amazon, had rolled out this AI a number of years ago, a pilot. They didn't even actually roll it out in practice. They had done a pilot around using AI for hiring. They found that it was biased against women, and so they stopped the project. That's actually exactly what you would want to see a company do. Experiment with the technology, maintain oversight to see if it was causing any problems before it went into production. And if it does, either fix those problems or stop the project. And that's exactly what they did. But instead of headlines, either saying that, American company is correctly providing oversight of AI, the only headlines you'll ever see about that incident is, Amazon employed sexist hiring algorithms. And there's just this disconnect between, the reality of what happened and the headlines. And there's also just this disconnect between, where there, as you said, there's so many benefits right now from the technology. There was a great study I saw recently where, scientists were using AI, generative AI specifically, to, explore, some medical research and creating new compounds. And, part of what they were doing in this specific research was trying to see if the rate of discovery could be increased. And they were able to show that, the work they were able to do with this generative AI model was, equivalent to something like, 80 to 100 scientific, years of research that otherwise, it would take that long. And if humans actually going out and trying to do the same work, that's incredible opportunities, right? Like, we've seen them use generative AI to create a new compound that is, resistant to, the antibacterial resistance that can overcome that. These are things that will have significant impacts on people's lives. Those are not the headlines, right? The headline is, Tesla crashes.
Yeah, because somebody decided to sleep on the highway. So yeah, but see, again, I go back to often that it's not really a technology problem. It's a human problem. So for example, when you look at the bias, and sure there are bias because they train this algorithm on actual fact and thoughts and way to live and beliefs that humans have. So I like to say that AI is human after all, because it's just carrying the things that we do, in society. But all of a sudden, you just expect so much from technology, and I think that's the problem. Like even to call it intelligence, it's a little too much, in my opinion, to start with. And you're setting the bar so high, and then when you see that this bar gets set higher and higher because all the failure that they're telling us that technology is having, you just make people live in fear of that and not really appreciate it. So how do we change this vicious cycle?
Yeah, and I think, there's always this tension between, the kind of optimism and pessimism people have about the future, and then whether or not people are nostalgic about the past, whether they think it used to be better and we're somehow getting worse. Because I think that shapes a lot of this. And that's where, there's so many issues. One of the other incidents I wrote about in this recent article was around someone who was wrongly arrested, and the police had used facial recognition. And, there's been a handful of these cases over the last 2 years. And, all of them, of course, are, again, tragedies. I mean, someone's being arrested, they're being detained, their lives are being impacted. These aren't good things. But again, there's this kind of myopic focus on the technology side of it. And that's where I think it's misleading and harmful, because in each of these cases, the issue was fundamentally about poor police work. It was about somebody who, police that, first of all, weren't following procedures, because under no conditions should anyone ever be arrested simply because there's some kind of match in the facial recognition system. That's clear in every vendor that sells this to police. That's clear in every kind of standard that's ever been put out within police departments. And that just should never be happening. But two, the bigger point is there are lots of people that are wrongfully arrested in the United States every year. Not because of facial recognition, but because of other poor police work. And in so many cases, we have this kind of, myopic focus on just the technology portion of problems that it distorts and distracts from bigger issues. We could get facial recognition technology working perfectly. And, if that's all we focus on, then we're still missing all the people who are wrongfully arrested in the United States. If we focus on, addressing the potential harmful impacts on teenage mental health of social media, we're still going to have tons of teenage mental health problems in the world and in our country. And so, it's not that these issues aren't also important, but they're prioritized at a level that doesn't reflect reality, doesn't reflect the size of the actual problems. And I think that's where, we just need a better perception in our communities about where the problems are, because if we don't have that, we're going to push for the wrong solutions. And that's the only way we can solve some of these issues. And, if we can reduce wrongful arrest across the country, that will also take care of the facial recognition problem. If we can address mental health in this country, that will address the social media problem. In so many of these cases, we're going after, I think, some of the wrong problems, or focusing too much attention on the wrong parts of the problem.
Yeah, and you mentioned in the article too that a lot of these problems, some of those you just mentioned, or obesity, or the addiction to certain kind of technology that may bring to this problem, but they were problems that existed before too. So they were not born with the technology that we point the finger at. And I go back to maybe we expect too much from technology because we're lazy in doing other things. Like, instead of paying attention, you just prefer to have that easy button that, it's just gonna do everything. The Jetsons are here. I don't need to do anything anymore. And we need to be in control. We need to be still thinking that it is a tool. And the big fear, and I definitely want your opinion on this, is that if we don't understand technology, how are we going to regulate it? So, I mean, we've seen cases of people in Congress that honestly, they didn't really clearly know much about a conversation with Meta or with Google. So if we don't cross that line, I think the problem is going to get worse and worse.
That's right. And the good thing with, I think, some of this technology is more and more people are using it. And it's in some ways, not necessarily inescapable, but it's integrated into many people's lives. And so they see it. And, we no longer have, the members of Congress who fundamentally don't understand, what the internet is. You can go remember, Senator Ted Stevens saying, it's a series of tubes. That was this famous, disconnect between much older senator and not really understanding the technology. I think, increasingly, I hear, not only congressional staff, but, members of Congress themselves actually sitting down and using some of this technology. And I think that dispels some of the harms and some of the fears around it when it's fear of unknown, when you don't understand the benefits of it and you don't understand, the ways that you might use it or not use it. That's when I think people's, it's easier to imagine what might go wrong than what might go right. And, that's where it's easy to kind of get caught up in the fears about how we need government to step in and protect us from this uncertain future. Because I would argue that, in many of these cases, the biggest risk is a lack of AI adoption. We're talking about this technology, right? The biggest risk for most people, it's not that you're going to be in an unsafe vehicle. We have safety regulators for vehicles, and they're paying a lot of attention to these issues. And I think they will continue to pay attention. I think the bigger risk is that we're not going to have, AI deployed in radiology as quickly as we might otherwise, and that is going to cause, people to not have tumors found, and that will have life and death consequences. But those are harder to measure, right? Those are harder to see, but they're significant. We think about education in our country, and so many students that are falling behind in learning, especially after COVID, and lack of funding for teachers. Well, you look at what Khan Academy is doing with you can use generative AI to provide personal tutoring, personal interactions with students, answer their homework questions for someone that doesn't have a parent or a tutor that they can go to. These are things that could significantly impact, the quality of life of, millions of students in our country. But do we have any kind of national strategy from the Department of Education about how to use AI? No, we don't. They're only thinking about what are the risks to student privacy and some of these other things. And that's where, again, we just have to get them, one, to understand the benefits, but two, to actually, have some, I think, enthusiasm for it, right? I mean, some of this has to be driven by, interest. You think about the space race, back in the, the 60s, people were excited about that. Some people were scared about it, but a lot of people were very excited about it. And it was that enthusiasm and that vision that, led to a national program in space that got us where we were, got us to the moon, got so many, technologies that we now take for granted, like GPS, which apparently is causing us to crash and die. I mean, that's where, it's kind of all come full circle.
Yeah, I think that the example of the space race is excellent. Actually, I wrote a newsletter not too long ago about how when we go to space, and I'm lucky enough to have astronauts that I had conversation with, and the overview effect when you go in space and you look back and you understand how the planet is just one, everything is synergic in between. And so in a way, going to space is a way to look back into understanding the planet. And so I made the assumption where looking at AI, we never talk about ethics so much in the public conversation as we're doing now with AI. I mean, now I go back and I wish I studied philosophy, but at the day that I was doing is like, what are you going to be, a teacher of philosophy or philosopher. Now you're actually in the conversation all the time because we're kind of looking back at ourselves, and it's a good moment to do that. But following your article, the only way to do it is to really understand. And the problem is that these articles that are so, raising the alarm for the coming of a new atomic bomb, AI is going to destroy us. First of all, they don't even explain if it's generative AI versus general AI versus the tunnel AI, which is very good in what it does in healthcare, looking at scans and see things that a doctor or human can't possibly see because they learn all this pattern. But again, I think the change needs to come with education. Mm-hmm. I mean, we just shut the door. Like you said, we don't understand it, let's not use it. But that train left the station. There is not that option, and it will be a bad one. So how do we educate people? How do we change? I'm not asking you the answer. I mean, if you have it, bring it. But how do we break this circle where people are so, I don't want to say gullible, but they don't want to do that research. They don't want to read 3 articles on the same topic and then made up their mind. We didn't educate people in the system, in the educational system to do that. It's more like, this is the truth. It's on the internet. It must be true, right?
I think your point about ethics is a great one, because so many people are talking about ethics now. And I think what is taking a lot of people, especially policymakers, a long time to catch up on is that, ethics, there's not one answer out there. And so, when they say, the solution that's being put forth often is, okay, well, you just need to, we need rules to make sure you're building ethical AI. And then they think they've solved this problem. And of course, if you go and you ask the philosophers, they say, well, wait a second, there's no one answer to what is ethical. There's so many different theories about what to do. I mean, when people can't settle on basic questions, should you lie? Well, it depends. Famous, philosophical questions, trolley problem, right? All these things that come up again and again. And they're saying, okay, but we want you to, code rules, right? Hard and fast rules into these machines that embed ethical principles that we can't even agree upon. And, I think that's where there also needs to be more recognition of the fact that, we live in a messy, complicated world, and there's not simple answers many times. And so the starting point is not that, okay, there's this one right way to do things, and it's just a matter of, getting everyone to march down that path. I don't think the world that we want to live in. That's a very, dark world, actually. That's more of a dystopia where we say there's only one right way to live. And so, I think there has to be more recognition too of the fact that there are lots of different perspectives and diversity of thought, and we should encourage that diversity of thought and views in this space. But when you do that, of course, you get everything, and some of those maybe thoughts and ideas aren't the best.
Yeah, I mean, culture and ethics is definitely the big issue. But people love to hear that. I mean, they want to live in most people. They do want to live in a world that it's black or white, it's good or bad, it's evil or it's holy. I don't know. I don't want to go in religion here, but the politics as well. I mean, people sometimes they want to be told. They choose the source, and then whatever the source told them, it's a newspaper or a political party or religion or whatever, then that's what you take. Again, it's the easy button, and we just need to learn to be a little bit more, making our own mind on things and not be afraid of it. So, well, I hope that conversation like this and articles like the one that you wrote will make people think. At least don't judge before you try something. Like I know plenty of people that they say, I would never use AI. And I said, well, have you tried ChatGPT? Do you even know what you're talking about? It's like, no, right. I'm not going to mess with that. Well, then I'm not going to take your opinion on it. That's for sure. Well, Any tips or advice that you want to give to people that maybe start thinking about technology with a lot of fear, and that they may want to, see if they can change their mind?
I guess maybe the last point I'd make is I think often the technology sector and tech companies and just that whole Silicon Valley, it's thought of as it's not your neighbors, it's not your friends, it's not your family who's working there, even if it is. It's this kind of remote other force, and it's I think a lot of people have tried to characterize it as something harmful and negative, but more than that, just something that's outside of the rest of our community. And I think that's really unhelpful. I think we remember that these are the same people that would work at any other business and work at the grocery store, or the post office, or whatever. They're part of our community. It's not an us versus them. I've never really had conversations with technologists, whether they're at a company or open source or government, who isn't trying to listen to their users and make things better for them. And so I think the point there is instead of looking at it as an us versus them problem, it's really about a community problem. How do we solve these problems together? And I think if we take that perspective, it's less about cracking down on this the big bad wolf that's out there, and more about just kind of working hand in hand with our community to build a better future, which is what technology and progress should really be all about.
Right. I totally agree with that. And to be part of it, like, I mean, if you want to criticize it, to criticize it with the intention to help everybody else to make it better. I love that perspective. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for this time and for writing that article that inspired this conversation. I hope people can read it. There'll be a link to that article and to your social media so they can get in touch with you if they want to for the Information and Technology and Innovation Foundation, ITIF. And stay tuned. If you have comments, question for us, put it in the social media. Don't be afraid. They're not going to bite. It's okay. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks again, Daniel.
Thanks, Mark.
Devo unlocks the full value of machine data for the world's most instrumented enterprises. The Devo Data Analytics Platform addresses the explosion in volume of machine data and the crushing demands of algorithms and automation. Learn more at devo.com. BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com. Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Society podcast, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. If you learned something new, and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share the ITSP Magazine podcast network with your friends, family, and colleagues. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.